Okay, we're live, just so everyone knows. Hey, and Tommy's here just in time. um,
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you doing?
Not too bad.
Cool. So we just went on the air. So hi, I'm Dan. If you're watching later, I live in Oakland, California. I am a full stack developer looking for work right now, and I've been learning JavaScript for probably like 6 months. That's why I'm here. So just Jay, like, can you just quickly like introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm just also someone trying to learn, maybe do a career change, and yeah, glad to be here learning,
Cool.
meeting
Yeah,
new
good to
people.
see you again.
Yeah.
Um, Kim, can you just briefly introduce yourself?
I'm Kim. I'm in the Atlanta area. I've been, I guess, starting, I guess, about April. And so I'm now looking for a job and trying to hone or just understand the logic behind certain things.
Cool. All right, glad you're here. Hey, I saw some pictures from your event. It looked like really cool and well attended.
Yeah, it was. And we have another one Saturday, which is actually we're going to do the first code kata on Saturday.
Oh, awesome. Very
Yeah.
cool. Cool. Well, welcome back. It's good to see you. Tommy, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Tommy. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. Currently a Salesforce consultant by day, trying to become a developer by night. And I got way too wrapped up in this Ante Up thing so far. I've like gone off the deep end with some of the stuff I was trying to do. So it'll be interesting.
Cool. That's great to hear. So I played with it over the weekend and I wrote that test suite for myself and I know Kim downloaded it, which is awesome. I hope if anyone else gets use from it, that's great. Um, so yeah, if anyone has questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. I would love to know, like Tommy, it sounds like you're pretty in the thick of things. Jay or Kim, like have you tackled the challenge itself yet?
No, I wanted to, because I sent you a email, I mean a message on Slack. I wanted to know what the process was, and I honestly am a little gun shy. I don't know where to start. So, yeah, just gonna be honest.
Okay, no, not a problem. So I thought it was like I thought there was going to be one of these every week, but Jamal, who writes them, said that there was going to be one every 2 weeks. So
hmm
we'll talk about it this week and then again next week. So hopefully, um, you know, you can find some inspiration this week and
Yeah.
then maybe have something working by next week. Um, so I have a solution, but I don't want to just put it right out there. Can we hear from Jay? Like, did you work on this at all, or are you just curious, like dropping in a visit?
I'm just super curious, and I want to learn from you guys. So, or get inspiration, as you said. I mean, I do have some ideas, but it's interesting having ideas and then trying to make it work.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think it's good that it's every 2 weeks, because then you can meet up one week, talk about, ideas and maybe solutions, and then you have still some time left to kind of get it working.
Cool. Yeah, and we don't want to overwork Jamal either. Um, cool. All right. Well, Tommy, why don't you share what you've got so far, and we can talk about like what you've done and ask. And Kim and Jay, like, feel free to ask questions for whatever.
Well, before he does that, my question
Mhm.
is, Tommy, okay, so I went through the test, so I was able to fix the first thing that was on your test.
Mhm.
But I want to talk about the logic of how you would start something like this. Because
Okay.
what I find is oftentimes either I'm doing a tutorial and everything's already figured out, or I'm catching something in the middle and I don't know how to start.
Okay. Cool. Well, I have some ideas. Tommy, how are you approaching the problem? And then I think Kim, like we can circle back
Okay.
to your question of how to get started, like once we see some other some code that's already been because I definitely have ideas, but I don't want to just like say, well, here's how you do it, right? Um, Tommy,
Yeah, so
yeah.
mine, the way I handled it, so I kind of I used it as a way to dig in a little bit deeper. So I went a little bit more than than just the tell me what the hand is kind of thing. So in my mind, I was like, okay, well, let me break it down and sort of work on it like in a more object-oriented way. But and I also used it as a way to sort of learn a little bit more about design patterns as well, and just test some out. I've got a couple different versions going on here because I had one version, and now like I'm in the middle of a second version trying to make it a little bit better, and it's crazy, and probably both are way overly complicated for what we're trying to do. But basically, what I did was I said, okay, let's break it down. So we know that you got a hand, and a hand has cards in it. And then I also added in that cards come from a deck. So I also included, so basically those are my three objects. And I can kind of show you what I got. It's going to be really crazy and hard to understand probably because I don't have it really cleaned up, but I can show it to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so let me show you, oh boy, which one is it going to show? I think this one. Okay, let me boost up the font here.
Yeah,
okay.
That looks good.
So what I did was I basically made like a little mini library or module, whatever you want to call it, and just called it Poker. So this was my first version of what I've got. So basically, I've got it broken down into three sort of separate areas. It's not very well cleaned up here, so I'll sort of break it down for you. So first I made these constants, which basically here's your suits, right? And then we also have ranks. So what this does is it'll take whatever the rank of the card is up to ace, and then it will also give you a value. So it's an object. Basically, the key is whatever the rank is, and then the value is whatever the card's value is in comparison to the others in a game of poker. Then I also have here so basically I didn't really use constructors. I can go into it later, but I basically was trying to do it without constructors because I've been reading up some articles on why it's better to use object.create and to use prototypical inheritance from JavaScript and whatnot. And there's a bunch of stuff on it. So I tried to do it that way. It's basically the same thing as a constructor, more or less. You're just using object.create. But here I've got a card. So this is the first object. So a card, every card has a rank, it has a suit, and it has a value. And then we break it down. So this way, I made each one basically like its own little module, so that way you can't go in and change a card's existing rank, suit, or value. You can just retrieve it. So that's why we have functions here: get rank, get suit, get value. And then I also have one which is toString, which gives you like, A of D, ace of diamonds. Right? So that one is pretty straightforward, and then this is the function to just create it. So this brings it back. Basically what this does is it creates an object, and inside of the object, or inside of this this function, it says, okay, make a new object, and then make that object's prototype this object right here. So basically everything that's created off of this object.create gets these four methods to go along with it automatically. So it's kind of like a constructor if you're using like card.prototype or something dot blah blah blah.
Okay.
So that's how that sets up to create. Hand is where it gets a little crazy. So this is where the scoring comes in. So right now I have it set up to I have an object that takes hand values. So in my other version I set this up differently, but basically this takes whatever the string is and gives you that hand's rank in comparison to all the other ones. So straight flush is the highest, so we'll rank that and give that 9, and then high card is the lowest with 1. Then there's some other helper methods. Some of these I don't use. This one I just use as more for debug purposes to show. It'll like return a hand. A hand is made up of cards, right? So this will return all of the cards in the hand into its string from that toString method from earlier. So it's going to show you like 2 of diamond, like 2D, A, C for ace of clubs, and so on and so forth. Then this is where we start getting into the scoring. So we can get into these deeper later, but there's a lot to it, so I'll just kind of go through it. But this checks if there's a low straight, basically if it starts off with an ace and goes 5, 4, 3, 2, not in order, basically. It takes an array of values. Same thing with straight here, it just checks for the values in this array if they're all in sequential order. Returns true if yes, false if not.
Okay.
Flush will take an array of suits, and we'll see where we break it down and make the suits and whatnot. But basically, it just says, are all the suits the same? Return true, meaning that hand is a flush. If not, return false. Check matches. This is where I go in and look for pairs and 3 of a kind. So basically, what this does is it loops through the array of the card values one by one, and it says, okay, is the value I'm looking at right now equal to the next value? If so, then we're going to say that it's consecutive, right? That it's a match. So then at first it'll say it's a pair. So I have an array for pairs because there can be 2 of them. So it'll push a pair onto the array. If the next value is also the same, meaning there's 3 of a kind, then it sets the 3 of a kind value to whatever that value is. Same thing for 4 of a kind if the next value is 4. And you can also do 2 pairs as well if there's a second pair that goes along with it. This is where I started getting a little crazy. And we'll see if it actually works later. And what this is going to do is it's going to return an object with all of the options. So it'll return pairs if there's an array. If there's pairs, if there's 2 of them, then it's going to sort them by value. That I was thinking ahead for tiebreakers. So if there were, like, let's say one hand has a 2 pair and it's king and jacks, and the next one is king and 8, or not king and 8, like queen and 8. The one with the kings as its top pair will win because it's higher.
Okay.
Then it just returns whatever the 3 of a kind was, if any, the 4 of a kind, if any, and then it also returns a Boolean value for full house. So it looks if there was 3 of a kind, and if there was a pair to go along with it. I think this. I'll have to fix that. I don't think that's right. But basically, if there's a pair and 3 of a kind, then it'll say, hey, that's full house. This is where it goes in and calculates it. So it basically takes everything from above here and runs the tests to see what it is. And those values, so what we pass into these, like the check matches and the check straight and whatnot, we take the hand, the cards in the hand, and then we sort the cards by value, and then we map it so that the array is just the value of each of the cards. So it starts from the highest to the lowest, which makes it easier to look if it's a straight or if there are pairs and whatnot. And then suits is kind of the same thing. It takes the cards and then just maps it so we only have their suits left. And then it also I just did this to make it easier, is just we sorted by suits. I don't really think we have to do this because every suit has to be the same in the hand, so that could probably go away. Now I'm thinking about it. But basically this is to get just the suits of the cards so that we can pass it to the check for flush. Then it goes through and basically whatever it is, it will return the string. If it's a straight and a flush, it's a straight flush. If there's matches and it's 3 of a kind, then it's 3 of a kind. This is where it'll spit out whatever the string is, basically. And then this is the return for hand. So these are all the methods that you can. Or no, this is for just like this calculate method that I have. So it returns all that to use, and then that's where it spits out here. And then I won't go into the deck stuff, but basically I've got it set up to where it'll create all 52 cards in the deck with their rank and their suit, and then you can shuffle it so that way. This is more for so I can just run tests on it.
Okay.
So basically, when I run my or when I run this, I can always get different hands from a shuffled deck. So I won't go into all of this necessarily because it's kind of out of it.
Yeah, so you could actually like create a game with that.
Yeah,
with that
so this is
option,
that's where I started. So I started and I said, well, maybe I can go all out and do a game with it. So that's where I just went ahead and made a deck to go along with it.
Cool. All right.
This is actually where we compare. I've got it set up to where you can send it an array of hands or give it hand objects, pass it to this function called compare hands, and it will go through and calculate which one is the winner. And then it will return that hand. So let me pull up stuff here. I just have it set. I've got a GUI version that I can show you, which is a little bit different, but this one I have set to run from the command line, just using Node right now. So let's see. Get. Okay. So basically, what this is showing.
Can you increase the font size on it?
Yeah. I don't know if I can or not. I think I can. Let me zoom.
Command plus usually works.
Whoa, that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry, 1 second. Technical difficulties. Let's see. There we go. Is that a little bit better?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so basically here I run this NoPoker.js. What it does is it deals out 4 hands, and then based on those 4 hands, it runs that compare, and then says which one is the winner. So here we've got 3 hands that were just high card, and then we've got one that's 2 pair, so that one is the winner.
Oh, that's very cool.
We run that again, right? Every time we run it, it's going off of a new shuffled deck. So we're going to get something different every time. So I haven't gotten into where it checks if there's duplicates, if there's duplicate cards. I know that was one of the things. That's sort of on my to-do list for later. But this was more, I just want to see, like, if I were to actually deal out from a quote-unquote, realistic deck, at four hands, can I tell which one was the winner from that?
That's very cool.
So there's a whole lot of code here, and I could probably clean it up, and that's what I've been trying to do in my version 2, but I've ended up adding more stuff to it. So I don't even want to get into it really, but I'll show you what it's kind of looking like. So let me refresh this. So this is what I was working on with the version 2, is I have it actually set up to run on a website. So basically, it's the same thing as what we were looking at before in the command line, but I wanted to make it on a website, basically. So to start off, it just sets everything to these backs, and I'll show you how I got these pictures as well. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But if I click deal hands, then it basically does the same thing, right? We still have the pairs and the high cards and whatnot, but it actually is a little bit more stylized. So I added it to where it'll show you, instead of just saying it's a pair, well, it's a pair of 2s, it's a pair of jacks, my hard card is an ace, and then it will go through and calculate the winner from there. It's still kind of buggy. Not everything is set up correctly right now, so sometimes it'll say, 3 of a kind when it's a full house in reality, so there's things I'm still working on. But it's the same thing. So every time I click deal hands, it's going to give me something different. And to add all this in was just some jQuery. These pictures, so I don't have the link in front of me right now, but I'll post it later. It comes from, there's actually a GitHub repo where somebody made it so you can basically create these pictures on the fly. It sort of makes the like SVG versions of the cards, and you can set them in whatever different size you want. So basically, you just import that script in, and you call, poker.get card, and you send it in the values that you want. So basically, I've added it to when it creates all the cards in the deck. I just added another parameter that says, okay, here's the card image that goes along with it. So it would be the same, whatever is needed to make a jack of hearts and a 3 of hearts, 2 of
really
hearts,
cool.
et cetera, et cetera.
This looks really, really great. You know what might be helpful is if you could walk us through, just in your code, when you create a hand of 5 cards,
Yeah.
how do you test it? Like, where do you put it so that we can see? Because I think like the question Kim asked was like, where do I get started? Looking at these cards, and I'm just curious like how you solve that problem. Like, I'm sure you showed us the code, but if you could specifically like walk us through the steps.
Yeah. So, starting from the top, basically the way I went about it, I started and said, okay, well, we need cards. So I made an object for cards. You didn't necessarily have to do that. You could just go up here and, for every suit and every rank, just get a suit and a rank and make an array of 52 strings, but just to make it more, I guess, robust down the line, in theory. At least that's what I was thinking before I went crazy, was to set it up so that they were all objects. So I started off and said, okay, well, I need a card. Then I went to the deck and said, okay, now that I have cards, I need a deck to keep all the cards in. So then I went through and created the deck of 52 cards. Then I said, okay, now I can handle getting a hand of cards. And that's where there's actually a method here. So this is sort of where the hand comes from. So there's a method on the deck object called deal hand. So you give it a number of cards, or by default it just goes to 5.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially what it does, this is sort of the meat right here. It goes through, and there on this array called deal, which is basically just the array to keep the hands, for however many cards you want, it's going to push a card onto the stack. And it's going off of this draw card method, which up here is basically just take the first card off the top of the deck. So that's where cards.shift, or you could do cards.pop.
Okay.
And then it pushes it onto this delt pile, so it's kind of like the discard pile, so that way I can keep track of what's been used and what's still in the deck.
Okay. So you're working on this very literal model of like card comes off the top of the pile, card goes into the hand. You got it.
Yeah. It was basically every time I started thinking about it, I said, okay, well, in real life, how would I do this? That's sort of how I approached it. Is if I had a deck of cards, of course I had to create all the cards first, which you wouldn't really do in real life. Mm-hmm. But if I had that and I was going to lay out 4 hands, 5 cards each, and then try to figure out, which one is the highest. That's sort of the thought process behind going about this code. So it was a lot in my head. It was a lot easier than when I started actually putting my fingers to the keyboard, which is usually how it goes, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sure there's probably like. And I was even thinking about making just a way easier way to do it without having all the deck and stuff like that, but I ran out of time. I wanted to try and make it as nice as possible. So
okay,
that's why it's a little crazy.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so now you've got a hand of cards. Where do you put the hand of cards to figure out what kind of hand it is? Because that's like the real challenge, right? Like that's the actual question we're trying to solve here. Right.
So I can go down here. This is where I sort of use everything that I've made up above, right? So let me space this out a little so it makes it maybe a little bit easier to see. Okay, so what I do is I create a deck, and to do that, I call this new deck function. Basically, that creates all the cards. And then shuffle, which there's a sort of a shuffling algorithm I found online that makes it as random as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So you call that. So this gives you a shuffled deck. And then hands, we just have an empty array right now where we're going to put our hands later. Then what I call here is I have a for loop, and I want 4 hands, and for each hand I want, I'm going to push into this array of hands a hand from this deal hand method. So that's where it happens. So the deal hand creates like the array of cards, and then that gets pushed onto this hand, into this hands array. Really, this is like an object. It's like the hand object, right?
Okay.
And it pushes it on here. So this is really going to be an array of hand objects. Then for each hand object that we have after we've created it, I do a console.log. That's what puts it out to the terminal. Hand.show is actually, if I bring it up and compare it, probably be easier. So hand.show, well, it went away, of course. Let me see. One second. Here we go. Okay. Hand.show is what shows this array. And it just spits out all of the strings, the card strings that are in here. So jack of hearts, 5 of hearts, etc. And then it also spits out this calculation string, which gives you what type of hand it is.
Yeah, I think that's what we're most interested in, is like, how does the calculation work?
Yeah, so I went through that a little bit earlier I kind of flew through it. So here's this what this calculate does. Basically, we have all those helper methods above that find stuff, and then it's basically just a giant if-else statement. So it goes through and checks, okay, is this a straight and a flush? If so, then this is a straight flush. If it's just a flush, it's a flush. If there's a 4 of a kind value, then we're going to say that this is a 4 of a kind. So it goes through and checks each one as it goes along. And then if it doesn't match anything, then it says it's just high card. So the trick actually, no, I do have it. The other part of the comparison between the hands comes down here in this compare hands method, which is just another sort of helper method I have. And it goes through for all of the hands that we send into it. It's going to go through and compare each one.
Okay.
So this is sort of where it compares hands between hands. So I also, off this calculate method, it basically returns an object that has a different set of things. So not only does it show you what type of hand it is, so this is the string right here, right? It says it's a high card. It also has a value that goes along with it. So that's where that object that showed that a straight flush is 9 and a flush is whatever 5. It takes that string and returns whatever the value is of that hand. So that's what really compares hands between hands. So it shows, okay, well, is the hand I'm looking at greater than the max? Like, is that value greater than the max value? If so, then that becomes the new sort of winner right now. And it goes through and just keeps comparing the max between the hand I'm currently looking at. And then at the end, we just return whatever the winner is. So we turn basically whatever the max value hand in our set of hands was.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, that is a lot of code. That does a lot of stuff. That was really great to see. Does anyone have questions for Tommy? I mean, I know this was a lot to look at. And then that strategy of like you just got to grind through it, kind of. Like the huge if-else statement. Like I don't know that you're ever going to get away from that necessarily. But yeah, questions for Tommy.
Sure, I got one. First, I want to say it's really good, really cool, very interesting way you went about the uh, kind of problem and how to solve it. Um, the question that I had is, what if you made it to where it was user input, where technically, let's say the user wants to put in either ace and a three or something, and maybe do the user does their own um, set of cards, um, and that way maybe you could get away from trying to build the deck. You can let the user build it for you. Just an idea.
Yeah, no, that's definitely what I was thinking about at first, and then the reason it's so complex is because I got stuck on, well, I've already got an idea of how to make a poker game in general, and then I tried to just kind of go into the deep end and make the poker game. So lesson learned here is start start simple and then sort of build your way up. So what I want to go back and do is do the exact same thing that you suggested, Jay, and just do the simplest version of it and say, okay, well, let's forget about decks and whatnot. Let's just take in and input, an array of strings or 5 strings or whatever, and then that line up to cards, right? So instead of having an object of cards, just put in, 2C for 2 of clubs, or A, D, and then let that user input then generate the hand for me. And then basically the code then comes down to just the comparison between everything. So that's what I want to go back and do just to make it simpler. And then what all of this here is more for, if you were really going to go about making a bigger game or getting, more deep into it.
Yeah, I have to say it's really good. It's really interesting, and I think it was really cool how you were then able to put it on a website, and then you added, the pictures and everything on top of it all. I think that's like almost a finished project because you were able now to present it in a really cool, clean style. So good job. It's really awesome.
Yeah, thanks. One other thing too is sort of related to jumping into the deep end. Like, especially today, I was going through, like, in the version. I've got a version 2. I'm not even going to click on it because there's so many commented out stuff and whatever I'm trying to fix. Is that, halfway through it, I said, okay, well, I wonder what other, like, algorithms are out there for evaluating it, and I didn't realize that there's, like, whole websites and whole, message boards basically dedicated to trying to get the perfect algorithm for evaluating poker hands.
Oh, cool.
And it gets crazy. I mean, it is the stuff that they do is just it's way more math than it is like actual code, and it's actually way more compact than this, but it is really hard to understand. At least initially, I kind of understood it later on, but it's crazy. But if you go and look up, I think the big one, if you just type in like Cactus Jack poker evaluator, like this guy it's like the fastest one that you can possibly have, and it's crazy.
Oh, interesting. Can you post that link to the discourse page?
Yeah.
I think that'd be really fun. Like, post a link to your solution, and then talk about Cactus Jack.
Yeah, it's crazy. If anybody was actually able to do that and input that in, more power to them, because it's a huge. It's basically like a huge table, and they've ranked every single possible hand, and it's crazy.
Oh, okay.
Can I interject a second?
Of course.
Because I see we have 15 minutes left. So
No. We can go later. It's
okay.
hard.
My thing is, okay, because now I'm thinking about the tester that you did. So what you did, let me start with, this is awesome. I got most of it. How you got there, I have a big gap in my knowledge.
Okay.
So I guess what I want to know is when I'm at home by myself and I'm looking at, first of all, because I think that The tester you did was really great, and I want to start using those things. How can you say three things? Oh, this is the first thing I would do. This is the second thing I would do. This is the third. After you read the instructions, how do you start a project like this?
Cool.
This is where I'm just like,
Cool.
I don't even know where to start.
Okay, so I will say a lot of the work that Tommy did, that test suite kind of takes for granted. Like, for instance, like Tommy's code, he's creating cards and shuffling cards and creating hands for cards, and I didn't do any of that. I just designed that test suite. So like I'm assuming, and you know what? Let me post a link to the test suite in the chat, just so anyone who wants to can look at it. But basically, I've assumed that we're not dealing with like card objects yet. We're just dealing with an array of 5 short strings that represent cards. So similar to the way that Tommy did it, was like 2C would be a 2 of clubs, that sort of thing. So so they're like, don't be intimidated by all that code that Tommy made, which is awesome, but also like not entirely necessary to like solve this particular problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah, trust me. Don't write as much code as I did here. It was way
Cool.
way,
Okay, I just
way
posted the link if anyone
complicated.
wants to.
Now I'm trying to dig myself out of the complexity, and it's really hard. I'm almost about ready to just like restart it and just do the simplest version.
Refresh from scratch. Cool. Well, I posted a link if anyone wants a link to the test suite. It's there in the chat window. Then in terms of like, what are the 3 things to do to solve the problem? I guess for me, I just started playing around with it. Like, what do you do with these strings with this array of strings after you import it? And kind of what I hit on is like, there is this saying which is like, if you can't solve the problem in real life, how are you going to solve it with code, right? Like code is not can't do the work for you, right? So what I ended up doing is kind of like just walking through each different kind of hand and saying like, what are the patterns here? Like, what makes a flush a flush? What makes a high card hand a high card hand that's not a flush, right? And in that particular case, it's like, well, they're all 5 different values. The difference is that a flush has only 1 suit, whereas a high card hand will definitely have more than 1 suit. Will have multiple suits, right? So I guess that's what I would say is like, try to solve the problem without code first. Like for each, like what makes 1 pair 1 pair? What makes 2 pair 2 pair? What makes a full house different from 3 of a kind, right? And sort out that, like, what are the patterns you're looking for suits? What are the patterns you're looking for values? What are the patterns you're looking for in terms of like consecutive values? Like straights and straight flushes both have consecutive values, but other hands don't. So that was like the big breakthrough for me, was just like, what makes these individual hands real? And then I would say is find a way, now that you've got strings that, well, first of all, do you have any questions about that? Does anyone have questions about that?
No, that's clear.
Okay, cool. The next thing is like this input in the test suite, at least, and in the way I solve the problem, is like this input is just an array of strings, right? How do you turn a 2 or 3 character string into an object? Like, how do we know that 2C means it has a value of 2 and a suit that's clubs? Or how do you know that JD means that it's a jack with value 11 and a suit that's diamonds, right? So think about translating strings into objects that have values and suits. And then I would say, once you've solved that problem, bring them together, right? Like, now that you have objects that have values and suits, how do you look at a collection of 5 objects and tell what kind of hand it is, right? Like, that's figure out, yeah. So there's your 3 like steps. They're huge steps, but first, like, what makes a hand a hand? How do I turn a string into a card object? And then now that I have card objects, how do I figure out what kind of hand they are? Does that help?
I'm sorry, it took me a minute to unmute. um, yes, it does. So it's just I'm just gonna dive in. I'll figure it out. I guess that's just for me this the first step. Once I take the first step, I kind of can roll. But as I said before, so often with being self-taught, you're either following somebody's perfect example, there are no mistakes in it, or you feel like you're coming in the middle of something and you don't have the beginning part. So no one's talked about the logic of it. No one's done the pseudocode to write it out, and everybody just goes straight to the computer and starts coding. And you're like, wait a minute, what was the thought process behind that?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's part of being a developer, right? Is like you have to learn how to turn a real world problem into a code problem. Um, I will just say there was something you said that I wanted to respond to, and I can't remember what it was. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So that like solution, that like three-part solution that I just like said, that was easily like 4 or 5 hours of just like playing around with
Oh
it.
yeah, I'm
Would
sure.
work. You know,
Yeah.
like so. Yeah, like if you don't understand it yet, that's fine. Like the whole thing about like figuring out what the patterns for each hand is, that came like 2 hours after just kind of like playing around with strings and turning them into card objects. So like yeah, just get in there, play around with
Yeah,
it.
I'm just still at I'm still at that part of my learning where what you just said is turning a real problem into something that you can code. And not many I haven't come across many tutorials that really help with that. They talk about the languages, they talk about what certain things mean, they make sure you have semicolons and all that stuff. But the logic behind how do you turn a problem, how do you solve a problem with code is missing for me in a lot of things.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really interesting because I don't know that there is a tutorial, right? I think that's just a lot of like you just do it over and over and over again, and you have to like learn that way of thinking. Um, hmm, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
I
I think
mean,
there's a solution
it's
for
one of
that.
those. Like I don't know where. Like I think for me, for something like this, it's part of it is just trying to figure out, what you need. Sort of like what kind of data structures per se, to use a computer sciencey term, I guess. Um, like what you need. So like, how do I hold? Like, what is a card? What is a card made up of? How do I hold the cards? Like, what do I put the cards in to make a hand? Right? And you can do it. Mine is way more complicated than it needs to be. But you can. That's the cool thing about it, is that you can approach it in a million different ways. But I think that's, for me, that's like where I start, is what do I need, and how do I set it up? How do I visualize them in my mind to get it sort of into the code editor, for lack of a better word. I don't know if that helps, or if that made it even more complicated, but that's sort of my thought process behind something like this.
No, it does help because it actually just having this conversation helps me realize where the gap is. Haven't been able to articulate it until now and understand where because it's not even frustration. It's like this nebulous
Hmm.
thing that it's like and so just being able to talk it out, I'm like, that's what it is. It's the turning the problem into something that I could code. That's the step I need to focus on. That's the
Yeah,
step I need to practice
yeah,
because without it I could talk about closures and execution stacks and semicolons all day long, but they mean nothing, and that's why it seems like it's going in one ear and then the next, and tomorrow I've lost it because I'm not it's not um what am I trying to say, it's not the best word I can come up with right now. I'm slipping me. It's not nailed to anything. It's not a
hmm,
part of anything. I have all these little pieces that aren't connected to anything, and so being able to um Yeah, so that's what I need to really, when I'm thinking about something, how do I turn a problem into code and not just code, but how do I actually think out something?
Yeah, I think that's like the great challenge of learning this field that we've all chosen for ourselves is like, yeah, learning to think that way and solve those problems because that's what makes you employable, right? If you can turn real world problems and solutions into code. Jay said you're piping up there. What are you thinking about, Jay?
So I have a friend who was a writer or still is, and whenever he's trying to write like a story or a novel or something, sometimes people kind of get ahead of themselves, like, hey, here's the end of the story, but where's the beginning? And so sometimes, it's very simple to say, hey, I have writer's block. Where do I start writing? Where do I start going? And one thing that I've learned a lot, at least through coding, is just write something down. Start with just index.html and try to put like a little kind of a border around where you want things to be in. And so in other professions like writing, sometimes just starting and not letting yourself kind of stop yourself is a good way about putting something down on paper will help you.
And it's funny because I can do that in everything else, and I just haven't translated it to coding yet. And that's what it is, just taking those skills that I already have and moving them into coding. But I want to know what Daryl meant by logical understanding is developed. Are you still there?
Daryl? Maybe he's shy. Not, you don't have
Okay.
to. You don't have to
I mean, he
unmute.
could. Well, he can type it. I was just wanting to know what he meant by that. Okay.
One other thing while if Daryl's typing it up is an easy way to start now, especially that Dan has the Jasmine test suite for it, is, and this is one way to get into test-driven development, which is what I should have started with this, is, go through that and just start, run the test, see what fails, and start with the very first test. So the one I'm looking at here, it says, the Ante Up read function should say that this hand is a high card of a 7, right? So just start off and say, okay, well, how do I get to high card?
Exactly, and that worked for me. When I was going through that, it made sense.
Mm.
I mean, I followed your directions, and I was like, I was ready to move on to the next. It's just still, you provided it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I will say, like, I love test-driven development. That's a huge part of Ruby, which is like sort of, I guess, my native language. There's a lot of like test-first Ruby stuff, and I don't see as much of that in JavaScript. So that's kind of my inspiration here. But the way to do it is like, okay, so you can easily make it say high card, right? You just replace one line, return high card. So now the next step is like, how do you compare a high card to a pair, right? Because I think that's one pair is the next set of tests down, right? So that's when you actually have to start doing the real work, and that's where I stopped the instructions, right? It's like where it gets hard. That's when I stopped giving instructions. So think about that, like, once you translate strings into card objects, how would you tell
which one is higher? I mean, which compare? Yeah.
No.
Okay.
And then but this is what's test-driven. This is how test-driven development works. It's like just solve that one problem.
Exactly.
And then once you've solved that problem, then look at the next one, which I think is two pair or three of a kind. How do you tell the two hands you already know how to solve for? How do you tell them apart from the third hand, right? So now you've got three groups passing. So it is very incremental, and there's not one like, and then a bomb goes off and all the tests pass, right? It's going to be step by step, and that's okay.
Could you do me a favor and go through and explain the Ante Up spec JS file?
Okay.
At least just the first part.
Sure. Let me screen share.
Good, because I have mine sitting in front of my window.
Cool. So I'll also get. Is this running? I think I just have to open the file in the terminal. No. Spec runner. There we go. Okay. So this is from the version that I actually have my solutions in. Where did y'all? There we go. Screen share. Share the whole thing. So we got. This is what a complete solution would look like. Let me increase the font size here. So you've got 27 specs, 0 failures, this beautiful green all across the top. And then the groups, right? So we're looking for high cards. So I've got 3 different scenarios that are high card hands. So if we look at the spec file, I've got this cluster here, describe high card, with a 7, with a 10, with an ace. And I've created a hand that matches that description, right? So the highest card here is a 7. The highest card here is a 10. The highest card here is an ace, right? And then group for 1 pair, 2 pair, and then.
What is describe a JavaScript word, and is it? I've never seen it.
So this is those are Jasmine functions, right?
Okay. Okay. There you go.
So hidden here in the lib file, which I said in the in the README, I was like, don't touch anything here, right? Because
exactly.
Stuff. So I mean, you can look at it, you can read it. But I would just say like, don't edit anything. So this is Jasmine. And this is something that Pivotal Labs, I believe, developed. Describe and it, I think they actually got those from RSpec. Like that's a Ruby testing framework that uses describe blocks and it as like statements. I don't know that I use them exactly correct necessarily, but so this is Jasmine. I don't know the guts of what's going on here. But basically what it does is every time you save the file, you can refresh this page and it will run the tests, basically. Like, see, does your object, does anteup.read return the value that the test says it's supposed to return, and translate that into this pretty page here.
Yeah, so Dan, if you go back to the actual spec file itself, basically what this is saying is, so you give it a description and it says, okay, well, I'm gonna run this function with a 7. You can write whatever you want there, but basically that expect method, whatever it's the first thing in it, so this anteup.read, it's saying, whatever this function returns should match whatever's in the to be section. So to pass this test, if I were to run the read function with that array of cards or strings, then I should get back high card. And then once that function returns high card, then that test passes, and then you go on to the next one. So you just keep incrementally making it so that that function ends up returning high card. And then when you go down to the 1 pair section, then all of those tests have to return 1 pair, and then 2 pair, and then so on and so forth.
No, I get that. It was just the word, honestly, describing it. I've never seen those, so I was like, what is that?
Yeah, that's Jasmine, and I think that they got that from RSpec. Although, for all I know, it went the other way. But those are common like testing framework commands.
Okay.
So, yeah, Jasmine defines those.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm just gonna try. I mean, and we'll see. We're meeting next week, right?
Yeah. Feel free to reach out with questions during the week too. Like, email me or reach out on Slack. I'm not on Slack all the time now that I don't have to use it for work, but I'll get your message eventually.
Okay.
Cool. So, I see Daryl responded here. The more you program, the more you understand logic, because the many little pieces that build up. Yeah, so the more 6-piece puzzles you do, the easier 60-piece puzzles become. Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that is kind of the goal for these challenge questions is like, can you take the stuff you've done in tutorials and tackle a problem where people aren't handing you the answer, you know? So I'm going to hold off sharing my own code until next week, I think, because I want people to play with it a little bit more. Cool. Yeah. Does anyone else have stuff they want to talk about? I mean, we don't have to talk about this the whole time. We can just chew the fat.
I just had a quick question. So you said that I think I saw on the Slack that there's a link where you would post the whatever solution you have.
Yeah. Are you on the? Have you ever seen the Code Newbie discourse page?
Yeah, I've been there. I don't think I've ever posted anything on it, but.
We're just trying to use that as like home base because the problem with Slack is that it ends up archiving stuff, and because there's so many people using the Code Newbie channel, I think it only holds like 10,000 messages, which doesn't sound like a lot, except there's like more than 1,000 people chatting on there all the time. So we just wanted to use Discourse as sort of the resource that will actually stick around, basically. So that's why I have a link to the challenge there and a link to this test suite there, and eventually we'll like post solutions there. So if anyone has questions, you're welcome to ask them there. And then Tommy, if you've your solution up on GitHub, it'd be great to post a link.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
Well, I'm satisfied. I'm actually ready to. Got a busy weekend, but yeah. Okay.
I got
Cool. Well,
2 comments. One comment is like I think about like learning this language as actually learning. So kind of how to write a sentence, how to write a paragraph, how to write an essay, and kind of feeling your way out there. So then you can start putting your own thoughts and ideas into writing. The other thing is, let's go Mets. I've been a lifelong Mets fan, and I feel like for once I feel vindicated. I've been laughed at and like humiliated because I like the Mets, so it feels good that they're in the World Series. I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll say as someone who lives in Northern California, I like seeing the Dodgers humiliated. So congratulations to the Mets.
And I'm a Cardinals fan, so I'm honor and duty bound to just hate the Cubs. So thank you for getting revenge. And I'm glad we didn't have to play the Mets and get embarrassed. So that was, I took solace in that.
All right.
So it's fine.
This conversation has exhausted all of my knowledge about baseball. So
I was just about to say, I have no team. I could care less. I'm happy for you guys.
I will also say that my dad is from Flushing, Queens, so that's like Mets territory. So my family, I guess I'm like by heritage a Mets fan, but I honestly
is that how it happens with your DNA?
Pretty much, yeah. Like they live all over now, but they have fond memories at the old Shea Stadium, which I think is like now demolished. Yeah, cool. So I'll just share. I had a job interview today that was not JavaScript at all, and I think it went okay. But I'm like pretty psyched. It was like a really good. It was my first technical interview actually, so I'm like pretty excited about it.
Oh, congrats.
Did they ask you? Was this like a technical? Was it just like a phone screening, or was it more like they asked you technical questions?
No, like they sent me like a problem set basically last week, and so I did the problem set, and then they looked at it and they said, yeah, like come in for an interview. So I met with the CTO, and we did like some whiteboarding stuff, just like how would you solve this one particular problem that they have. So I spent an hour with him, and then I spent an hour with their product manager, who I really clicked with the product manager. Like I feel like we got along really well, and it's just like talking about like their product and ways that they're trying to grow their user base. And then I met with the CEO for probably like half an hour, which is what was on the schedule basically. So I didn't they didn't kick me out early, which like honestly my first interview I was just like, as long as they don't kick me out early, like I feel like that's a win, So yeah, so I don't did I get the job? I have no idea, but it was it was like a really, really positive experience. So I'm like having a really great day.
Yeah, I had since we're gonna, I thought we were, but I had 2 interviews yesterday. I just started my process, and I realized very early on that I'm not cut out for the technical interviews because I have to process stuff. If you're never gonna figure out how well I do, how I can benefit your team doing that. But yesterday, one was a group, and this goes back to networking. A group of people I met like 2 years ago who have a startup, and the girl said she's been following my coding journey on LinkedIn and asked, hey, would you be interested? And that's for a Ruby, full stack Ruby. And then, because they're growing and whatever. And then the other one was for a front-end junior developer with JavaScript. So what I'm trying to do this weekend is really brush up on my Ruby skills.
Okay.
But I love how being a junior is you just get so much. People are like, yeah, we get it. Can you read it? That's all, that's really helping me. So it really helps. Jay, thank you for reminding me, and Daryl, this is one step at a time. And I don't have to, eat the whole elephant today. Just one step at a time. It'll come.
Good. That's great to hear that you're like off and running on a job search. Yeah, I was great. I think the reason I got this particular interview is like they weren't super impressed with my technical background, but I have, a background in marketing and in client service, and they want someone who can do both like the engineering side and also like investigate the client experience and like figure out what works to make it a good experience. So for me, that was like this particular job was like perfect match. So it's great that like you've got people that that are thinking of you and that say like, hey, like this job might be good for you where your skills are at right now, and they don't expect you to be like a master craftsman yet, So cool, congratulations. Like whether it works out or not, like congratulations.
Yeah, congrats.
Yeah, exactly. I have no attachment. It's just more practice. And yeah, I'm just cool. Like, okay.
Cool. Yeah, does anyone else have like other projects that they're working on that they wanna share or get feedback on?
Well, I have to leave. My dog now wants to go for a walk. So
okay.
I'll see you guys next week. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, Kim. Good to
Bye-bye.
see you again.
Bye. I was actually just about to ask her about her experiences actually running a Code Newbie meetup. So I don't have time to do it right now or in the foreseeable future, but I'm really tempted to at least look into it and starting one up in my area. It just seems like, I think I talked about it before, but most of the meetups I go to, it either seems like everybody there is super experienced and the stuff they're talking about is way over my head, or you've got the other ones where it's like here's the super basic intro to like HTML. Which, I'm still new, but I feel like, I would get more out of something in the middle of those two.
Right.
And I was just going to see what her thoughts were on that and how she got started. So I'll ask her, next week or shoot her a message or something. But I'd like to see more of those, something that's in the middle. I think there's benefit in both going to the different types, but, something like this locally as well would be good just to. I've seen like Code and Coffee where people go and they'll work on a project together for X amount of weeks or something. And in the meantime, you're also networking with people in your area too.
Cool. Yeah, so I would also say like Saran sort of never intended it to be like a network of local meetups, but people have approached her, right? So someone approached her in Austin, and I think Kim and someone else approached her in Atlanta, and she's launching Philly this weekend. So I would say reach out for her. And if you like, not to like brag, but I can like tell her that you want to talk about it, so she's not just like getting random messages. And I think she'd be into it. And she would probably know because she's done it a few times. Like, what do you need? Like, what what's like her availability, which I have no idea. She seems like a very busy person. So that I think might be a good next step for you. I mean, obviously listen to what Kim has to say, but Saran also could probably tell you like here's like she could give you more detail. She's very good about like turning experiments into process. So like that's definitely been something like with these groups that we're doing is like it was all an experiment and now we're kind of like getting a process. So I think she's probably at the stage where these experiments of local meetups are turning into a process and you could like be the next one that runs the process. So yeah, if you or just about learning more, like probably talking to her would be a good step.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
I have one question, and this is kind of more personal. I'm having trouble doing like time management, doing my 9 to 5, and then trying to do coding on the side too. How do you guys, I don't know, find time for it? And is it like 1 or 2 hours a day, or do you guys do more? I'm still learning and all that. I understand it's a slow process for me, but I'm just wondering how you guys did it because I feel like you guys are more advanced. So it'd be nice to learn some tips and tricks there.
Sure. So I'll say for me, like I do not think time management is like a personal superpower at all. Like, for me, it's like um, I like weekends because I'm in control of my whole day and I can say I'm doing this all morning and it gets done. For me, during the week is a lot harder, especially like right now I'm just looking for work, so my schedule is very flexible. I mean, I have things to do, but I can manage my own time. But like while I was working 11-hour days plus a half-hour commute on each side, which meant like there wasn't a lot of time during the week. So for me, it was about weekends and blocking off weekends. That's like that's the only advice I really have. Like it'd be interesting. Like I know Tommy, you work full time, so it'd be interesting to hear what you have to say too.
Yeah, it's kind of the same way. For me, a lot sometimes it just sort of when I it's gonna sound weird, but I sort of get like the feeling like I need to go code, and I'll just sort of stop what I'm doing like at whatever time and do that. Now, I mean, granted, it's a little bit more difficult. It's a little bit easier because like I live with my girlfriend, but my girlfriend is also in law school, so she is studying all the time as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we both come back from work in class, she's like, well, we're gonna make dinner and I'm gonna go study. So that's sort of when I take the time to do my own, coding and study as much as I can. Of course, I'm not sometimes it's like, hey, I got to take a break or, play a video game or something like that. But for me, I think you said it earlier, is if I get started doing it, then I just get on a roll. So I try to find times where, okay, I've got, an hour or two to spare. Let me just sit down and get started, and then I can get on a roll. Sometimes at work too, probably shouldn't be saying this too loudly, but if I've got nothing going on or it's lunch and my schedule's free, sometimes I'll pop open whatever I'm working on and do some there. It's a little bit easier for me because the job that I'm in, I'm around people who develop all day. Just I'm not doing most of the development. So, since I'm in that area and I can also explain to my boss and say, hey, I'm also working on the side to make my skills better, to move more in a development direction as well. And luckily, I have a boss who's pretty flexible with that and understands that and wants me to succeed and go in that direction. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's just about reaching out to the people around you as well at work too. If you don't have a whole lot going on or you want to learn something outside of your normal day-to-day tasks as well, because sometimes they respond to that, sometimes they may shoot you down, but it's at least worth a shot and seeing if what they think about it.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you so much, guys, for like answering that. I'm just, I'm getting on a roll here, but I'm noticing how slowly I'm going, and I was giving myself like a year to really kind of get nitty-gritty into it. So, always good to get feedback or ideas on how to do it.
Yeah, well, that brings up a good point too. I mean, for me, like I've been basically off and on programming for like years. Like sometimes I'll get into it and then I'll stop. I've really dedicated myself over the past year in getting back into it. So I already had some experience from before, which kind of helped speed me up. But yeah, it's definitely not something that's gonna happen overnight. So don't get discouraged if you don't know something immediately, or you don't absorb some like a book or an article or something the minute you look at it. It definitely takes time, and I'm nowhere near professional level yet either. So I've still got a ways to go.
Cool, cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. So for me, I don't really have any new projects this week. I've just been like going hard on like interviews and trying to put applications out there really. So that's been my focus. So I haven't had time to build, which kind of sucks because everyone always asks like, "What are you working on now?" And you're like, "Well, I finished this one thing and I haven't had a chance to start anything else." But yeah.
Can
So
I
that's
ask
kind of
you a
where I'm at.
question about that? So do you, when you do like your resume and all that, do you just put them a link to your GitHub, or do you try to bring like a flash drive or your computer into the office and say, "Hey, this is what I'm working on. Take a look at it." Well, how
Yeah,
do you
well,
like to
so
do it?
I include a link to my GitHub profile on my resume. Um, I Today I brought my laptop. It turns out I didn't need it, but they did ask me about a project, so I told them about something that I'd done, and then I said I'll email it to you afterwards. So I sent an email and said thank you, that I had a good time. Here's the link to the project that I told you about. So it might be different. It might honestly, you might end up in an interview and they'll say like, open up your laptop and show me what you're working on. You never know. In this case, like they wanted to talk about, they had a specific technical problem that they wanted to talk about, and they had some specific like product-based questions that they wanted to talk about, and then it was just kind of the interview with the CEO was just like very open-ended. So it could be different. It could be different at the interviews I have next week.
Cool, cool. Sounds good. I appreciate that because I was like, huh, how do I show people my work? I don't want to print out my code or something, bring in like stacks of bundles of paper.
Yeah, I feel like GitHub or just like even if you just preparing part of preparing for the interview is being ready when someone says, "Do you have a project you want to show us?" Is just like knowing which project it is and knowing how to talk about that one project. Um, and then it's like they might have their laptop and you can say, "Let's go look at my GitHub and find it on my GitHub," or they might ask you to open up your laptop and sometimes do like problem solving on your own system, so you've got your own hotkeys and your own text editor that you're comfortable with. Cool.
I got
So,
a
yeah, go ahead.
question jumping off of that. What would you suggest, like as far as a GitHub profile is concerned, like how many different types of projects like do you suggest having in there, and like what types of are we talking about like full-blown apps? Are we talking about just little tutorial
Mhm.
things here and there? Like from your experience, what do you think they're looking for?
I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like I have a great answer to this. I have not thoroughly like scoured my GitHub to remove every little tidbit that like a lot of it on there probably isn't interesting to an employer. Um, I don't know that anyone actually goes to look at GitHub profiles and just like reads through every single thing. Like I feel like it's there when you want to point someone to a specific um, project. But again, like I'm kind of shooting from the hip. Like I don't entirely know. This is the other thing is like if you're doing open source work, which so far I'm not, although a friend of mine has a project he wants me to get involved with, um, then it is cool if you can say, oh, I contributed to such and such plugin or gem or whatever that you may have heard of, and then there's a record of that on GitHub. But then like I don't really know what the standard is for like if you do a tutorial, should you put it up there or should you only put stuff that you built yourself? Um, I feel like too much is less of a problem than not enough. Like make sure you have good stuff up there, but if you have good stuff and stuff that's not so great, that's probably fine. But you know,
Yeah, I know one thing for me that I'm trying to keep up with and put more stuff up on GitHub because I have a GitHub profile and you know a couple months ago, where it shows like each day, here's how many commits you had in your streak. So, I have a little bit in there where I wasn't really putting anything up on GitHub. I was just sort of learning things on the side. So there's like a huge gap. So my goal is to try and get and keep it consistent so that, if an employer were to go look at it, it's like, well, why hasn't he been posting anything up on GitHub for 3 months?
I wonder about that too. Like, I'm not the sort of person who like tries to keep up appearances for anything in my life, So like, I know that there are people, right, who will say like, I have at least one Git commit every day, and I push it to GitHub, and that little bar never goes white. I couldn't live my life that way. Sometimes I just want a day off. And honestly, like a lot of the work I did over the summer is on private repos. It's on projects that aren't on GitHub at all. So like I was working. It's just not in my little bar. So
yeah, that's a good point. I think I think it doesn't matter where it's coming from, as long as you can say, hey, I've built or I have programmed this. Here are some things I've worked on. Then it doesn't matter if it's on GitHub or wherever. As long as you have something to prove that you did something, and you can prove that you understand, some of the stuff that they're talking about. I think that's probably enough to get your foot in the door, unless you're going after like some crazy experience.
Yeah. So Daryl posted that he tried to commit every day, but dried out. Yeah, burnout's real. Like you can't keep that pace. Put stuff on CodePen. Oh, cool. Yeah, if you're doing front end work, I feel like CodePen is like an awesome place to put a little.
Yeah, I love CodePen. I a lot of times just start there and just put stuff on because it's so instantaneous. You just see the changes immediately.
Mm-hmm. You can kind of just like summon any JavaScript library from the ether and say, now I am using React here on CodePen. So that's true. It's like a really good.
One awesome thing I did learn today in regards to CodePen, it may be the same way for stuff like JS Fiddle, is that you can pretty much pull in any like GitHub like a file or project into those, without having to like download it and put it out somewhere. I forgot where. I've got a bunch of links that I don't have in front of me that I can post, but it was pretty cool, and that's sort of how I tested out that the back of the card pictures that I did. I just grabbed it off of a GitHub profile and plugged it in just to see if it would work, and it did. So it's pretty cool, and it makes it a lot easier to test stuff out and to use other libraries without having to jump through hoops to get things to work locally.
Yeah, cool. All right, so it is 7:30 already for me. So does anyone else have other stuff they want to talk about? If not, we can wrap it up. Although I'm happy to stay a little bit longer, though I should eat before my next call at 8.
Nope, I think we're all good.
Cool. All right, well, I had a lot of fun tonight. I hope we can come back again next week, and maybe you guys will have some poker code to share, because I'm pretty excited about this project. I had a lot of fun with it for sure. All right, I guess that's it for tonight. I'm going to stop the broadcast now.